The leather briefcase hit the ground with a dull thud, its contents spilling out like secrets finally freed from their cage. Justine reeled back from the man standing across the elevator, his tailored suit a stark contrast to her stained diner uniform. Her shift had blurred into another exhausting 8 hours at Benny's Diner, a hole in the wall drenched in the scent of fried dough and old coffee. It was the kind of place where hopes felt greasy and the checkerboard tiles never quite reflected the light. Justine, picking up another spilled coffee cup, glanced at the clock for the 100th time. Her life, much like her dreams, was caught in a repetitive loop. The crowded elevator was a daily ritual, an old relic with flickering lights and a scent of stale cologne clinging to the carriage walls. She ignored the chatter around her, focused on escaping when the lights dimmed suddenly. Panic laced through the passengers' murmurs, but her heart lurched for a different reason. There, opposite her in the claustrophobic box, stood the city's most whispered-about figure, the Mafia boss known only as Leon. For him, an elevator was just a moving stage for business. Glances exchanged in windows that never showed faces, hushed deals made under humming fluorescent lights until today. Today spoke of unspoken tensions as the elevator shuddered to a stop, lights flickering into darkness. For a moment, the only sound was the collective inhale, the only image the glimmer of city lights far below through a narrow crack. "Great, just what I needed," Leon muttered, his voice low and rough, like gravel shifting underfoot. Her pulse quickened, but Justine's was a life accustomed to pressure. Her father's debts had been the black mold crawling across her future, and now fate froze her with the man whose name was a whispered curse. Minutes stretched into a tense eternity. As the prolonged silence crinkled like stale paper, Justine glanced at Leon. He was seemingly unbothered, adjusting his cufflinks as if preparing for a business meeting rather than being stuck in a box in the sky. And then the crisis deepened. A voice crackled through the elevator's intercom, the security team announcing delays. Apologies swallowed by the crackle of static that seemed to judge them for his disruption. "We could be here for a while," Leon rumbled. His attention shifted to Justine. There was an undercurrent there, a challenge, a test. Humiliation colored her cheeks. Here she was, arms crossed protectively over the evidence of her hard life, standing out like a speck of dust in his pristine realm. But Justine held a card few knew, a truth sealed beneath the polished surface of her resilient exterior. As Leon's indignation simmered, the walls of civility thinned between them. She spoke up, voice cutting through the growing anxiety. "If we're stuck here, might as well make the best of it." His eyebrows raised slightly, her unexpected bravado enough to soften the rigid set of his jaw. "You think you can manage that, sunshine?" His words danced on the lines of irony, testing the boundaries of her mettle. She swallowed, not missing the irony. "Guess you'd be surprised what I can manage," she replied, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly against the metal rail behind her. The pure resistance flicked through her as the dull beat of her life's setbacks taunted her, daring her to revolt. No one had ever expected much of Justine. In school, she was the quiet one, always sneaking books home to escape the throes of chaos that her life had become. No one thought she would amount to anything, especially after her mother left, her abandonment only a shadow now. Obstacles rose as Leon connected a call over the barely surviving mobile signal, barking orders in Italian, his hands gesturing sharply, a maestro of the underworld. His confidence crystallized in the enclosed space, filling it with an oppressive aura. Yet, as he whispered threats into the phone, Justine recognized the same cadence used by anyone making a desperate plea, just dressed in a suit and wrapped in power. It wasn't long before the conversation between them shifted small remarks, feints of normality. Each word a layer peeled back, exposing patches of a humanity that tabloids had forgotten to print. "What brings you to such grand towers?" he asked, curiosity twisted with suspicion. Justine met his gaze, her voice a mere whisper against the silence. "My father made me a promise once. I'm trying to use what's left of it." Leon nodded, a subtle irony in his responding glance. Promises have weight, don't they? The subtle reveal was there. The setup of his demeanor suggested more than just transactions, but a history burdened with unspoken promises. Amid the unfolding revelations, the elevator creaked ominously. A tangible tension, like the chill before a storm, settled over them. Justine gripped the rail tighter, sensing the climax drawn closer by a thread unwinding from the past they both shared. Two figures in silent confrontation against a mechanical captor. Her heart pounded as his demeanor shifted from stoic to introspective. "You hide something more than coffee stains," he remarked, not unkindly. Justine aimed to deflect, to protect the vulnerabilities that kept her afloat. Yet his observation was a reminder of what undercurrents ran deep and true. "Sometimes managing takes more than people see," she offered. The lights flickered, a reminder of their isolation and the irony of life's fleeting hints of clarity. A sudden jolt pulled them back, the elevator shuddering with the strain, lurching briefly before stillness returned. "We aren't moving yet," his words cut through both inquiry and statement. Eyes met, steely blue against earnest brown, worlds apart yet bridged by a shared confinement. Both knew it could be seconds, minutes, or hours before real rescue came. What mattered was how isolation could unravel layers stitched tightly by necessity. "Next time," Leon murmured, crossing his arms, his smile faint but real. "I'll choose the stairs." Justine's laugh was unexpected, brittle like ice cracking under weight, but enough to pierce the tension. Amidst laughter, confessions, and the raw honesty forced upon them, the elevator symbolized more than failure. It became their confessional box. Hope, tinged with uncertainty, reframed each glance. A second jolt, the lights buzzed to life, and a sense of strange relief. But within that clarity lay shadows cast in longer doubts. Without warning, the power flickered again, the final hum seeming deliberate and certain. Silence gathered like a dense fog. In that moment, the world outside paused, centered on the frozen potential caught in transit. An awaited rescue stalled, leaving only an unnerving glance between Justine and Leon. He turned, eyes shadowed by flickering light. "Did you hear that?" The soft click of a lighter unexpectedly split the darkness, igniting a brief flame that accentuated the sharp planes of Leon's face. "Afraid of the dark?" Leon's question cut through the veil of silence as Justine tilted her head slightly, shadows playing on her features. In the dim light, the pressing closeness of the elevator felt more confining. Justine matched his quip with steely resolve, etched in a half-smile. "Should I be?" With the tiny flame reflecting in his eyes, Leon considered her, the usual inscrutability cracked by a flash of amusement. The flame extinguished, darkness reclaiming whatever momentary reprieve it had granted. In those seconds, the complete transition from casual to intense engagement was palpable, a pressure cooker, shrinking their world further. An ambient hum crept back slowly, but the jittery anticipation never left the space. Justine shifted, aware of the fraying rope that hung between them. She brushed back a loose strand of hair, the ticklish feel a reminder of the vulnerabilities they both silently shared. Nuances often obscured in a life shadowed by clandestine dealings or waitress duties. Suddenly, an alarmed voice crackled through the intercom, breaking the suspended tension. Conciseness came laced with strain as scripted apologies tumbled through the static. "Technical difficulties. Repairs are on the way." Silent frustration steamed off Leon's stature, the alpha intimidation pluming alongside diligence worn like armor. But this wasn't his stage. It was open to vulnerability for both of them, stripped of all but mutual circumstances and the inability to steer their confinement. "Guess we're stuck with each other a bit longer," Justine said, her voice carrying a challenge softened by humor. Leon respected her quick wit with silence, nodding into the void. His gold watch glimmered briefly in the low light, time a paradox, irrelevant yet innately tied to every fiber of their predicament. "Do you always find amusement in adversity?" Leon posed the question, a curious undertone softening his raspy demeanor. Cocking her head slightly, she replied, "Adversity? My life's zone, Mr. Luxurious. If you can't laugh at it, you'll wind up crying." Leon gave a sardonic nod. "A lesson from poetry, isn't it?" They exchanged a look, acknowledging the unspoken truths carried in their solitary hearts. Justine had lived her life skimming reality by as money dwindled and hope weighed as slippery currency. Yet here, exposed amid flickering darkness and creaking mechanics, a sort of truce existed, fragile perhaps, but glinting with potential understanding. The elevator groaned, metal to metal, a grating song of discordance that amplified the isolation. They shared a suspended peace, foreign but momentarily comforting, even as the city beneath them continued its rhythm uninterrupted. In the stillness, Leon, for the first time, seemed less the archetype of brutish mystery and more of a human swathed in layers of unspoken passion. His anecdotes spoke of dancing shadows, the currency of deception and loyalty. "So you really are him," Justine murmured finally, a veil of awe tinged with discernment. A half-smile played at his lips, an affirmation. "As much as I'm me, you're you," he shrugged. Justine's brow furrowed in thought. The tangible thread of courage looped through the shared isolation. Doesn't it ever feel like, the heavier the duty, the hollow the contentment? Leon's gaze fixed upon her, a muscle in his jaw tightening. Worry etched in deep rivulets faded into silent validation, a recognition shared that no amount of influence could pacify. Sometimes, he admitted, voice low with a note of honesty rare beyond those prisoned walls. But more often than not, the allure of atonement. His words were almost a whisper, yet they reverberated against the cold steel encasing them. Justine considered the revelation, unfamiliar kinship twined through scars unseen but mapped in their exchanges. The jarring sound of the elevator sprang anew, momentum lending its vigor to their spirits without solicitation. Finally, Justine exhaled, relief flooded with disbelief. Yet, as movement resumed, Leon held her gaze with fortitude less formidable but more telling than appearances deceived. "You'll go back," he said softly, "to your world. I'll return to mine." Justine nodded, forcing back the sorrow touching her resolve, even if their worlds were indeed galaxies apart. Connections formed like fragile constellations. But the rhythm resumed only to stutter. The mechanics stirred before yielding again to the deep, all-encompassing silence. The finality threatened to stretch infinitely until reality confronted a possible resolve. A slow smile crept across Leon's face, diminished by a pained constraint of laughter on a brittle edge. "Looks like it isn't so simple yet, is it?" Justine allowed herself a soft grin, shared empathy winding its way towards submission. Maybe not all promises are made to be kept. The elevator swayed slightly, a renewed disturbance washing over them as understanding deepened. Every heartbeat like a seismic callback to choices unspoken, paths unchosen. Finally, before Justine could voice regrets or desires, Leon tilted his head towards the intercom as though expecting or hearing something only he could comprehend. "It is strange," he mused, almost to himself, the allure of shadows. He paused, the ambiance crackling with tangible intensity as his silhouette played tricks in the half-light. The sound of footsteps approached beyond the metal facade, and doubt lingered amid the pendulum of fate swinging wide to choose its plunge. And in the potent quiet, a single line, the cliffhanger, hovered in its echo. "Would you choose the shadows, if they were yours to own?" The piercing sound of metal scraping against metal ricocheted through the elevator, a sudden violent intrusion into the thick quiet. The sensation made the hairs on Justine's arms stand on end, an almost tangible creature made of friction and nerves. "Son of a," Leon muttered, his facade faltering as he stepped back against the wall, momentarily unbalanced by the unexpected noise. In the charged silence that followed, Justine watched him, her interest piqued, masking the apprehensive flutter deep within her gut. The elevator seemed suspended in its own universe, a tiny cosmos dangling above the world, tethered by the thinnest of cables and luck. Justine had been here before, in a place where gravity held possibilities hostage, where choices loomed as large as any open square. Working at Benny's Diner was supposed to be temporary. Each day she wore that uniform was a reminder that she'd failed to escape her father's ghost, whose debts were as much a part of her now as her own shadow. Her father had always told her to play the hand she was dealt. What he didn't say was that life would keep reshuffling the deck. Leon's sharp eyes observed her from under his rugged brow, a flicker of impatience glinting like the edge of a blade under dim light. He might be a feared businessman. His realm was the back alleys of negotiation. But here he was just another man trapped in a box. Justine cleared her throat, trying to chase away the tightness there, and met his gaze with an anchored spirit not unlike looking into a storm. "So tell me, Leon," she started, her tone even, "what is a high roller like you doing in a place like this?" Leon shrugged with the nonchalance of someone mesmerizingly familiar with chaos. "Business," he offered, the word curt and calculated. Though today it seems fate decided to execute some sort of shared detention. She lifted a brow with practiced ease, deflecting worry with unshaken bravado. "I suppose we're not total strangers to unconventional situations." His swift chuckle was surprising, curving the taut line of his mouth into something almost human. "It seems neither of us is where we belong." In that simple exchange, the air between them shifted slightly, from hostile cohabitants to temporary survivors. It was an acknowledgement that surfaced heavy, like a current carrying them, transient yet potent. "Stuck. That's a word I'd use," she replied, fingers absently tracing the fold of her apron, an unconscious nod to the habitual motions of her day-to-day survival. But beneath her resilient exterior, something warm flickered a notion that maybe she wasn't alone in her war against circumstance. The more Leon spoke, the more that notion solidified. For a figure so supposedly steeped in darkness, his humor was a surprise, even to himself, as if the facade of omnipotence among the city's underbelly had worn thin, allowing reality's cracks to let some light through. "Have you ever wanted to just start over?" Her question broke the delicate pretense of their casual banter, giving pause to the air around them. It came gently, yet it left a cacophony of desires and fears ringing. Leon studied her, a puzzle he hadn't expected to enjoy solving. Almost every day, he admitted, the weight in his voice grounding the levity of their entrapped banter. She shrugged, an echo of his earlier gesture, but where his was dismissive, hers was acknowledgement. "Guess we're both gamblers then," she said, defining them in that moment as players taking chances. Wagers riding on the lines between hope and despair. His reply didn't come immediately, the silence claiming them once more like a returning tide. But when it did, he crossed the thin boundary of pretense, his words edging on confessional. "It's rare to do business with honesty." It was an irony not lost on her, given their surroundings. Light slipped in through the elevator's small window as it rocked gently, the pulse of a city orchestrating their omission from its pattern. His fingers drummed lightly against the elevator's surface, a rhythm that spoke of impatience but also of life pulsating through idleness. "You, however," Leon continued, his voice slipping into something softer, "seem to be fluent in the language of resilience." Justine smiled wanly, cheek hollowing against the urge to accept that embrace of understanding. "More necessity than choice," she managed, the ache of her words hiding in the spaces between them, chiseled by experience and fortitude. Then as they lingered on the dangling thread of shared burden, the elevator groaned again, a riddle posed by its machinery beyond either of their control. Their surroundings offered no answers, just the sharp relief of proximity and shared breath. Leon tilted his head, a beckoning glance that drew her from the steel walls she hadn't realized were slowly closing in. "What would you gamble for?" he asked quietly, his question a gift or a challenge. It stilled her where she stood, her guard dropping imperceptibly as she contemplated that single query. Was it freedom, redemption, or something more intangible but equally hungered for, like belonging? "Change," Justine replied, exhaling a promise yet to be fulfilled, "for a life not defined by what others left behind." His gaze softened, an acknowledgement of a battle only the brave dared confront. "I imagine," Leon suggested, "that even damage makes for an interesting canvas." Then the world shifted again. The elevator, their confessional booth, lurched uneasily into movement. It was both a relief and a lesson in temporary comfort. "Looks like we're moving," she murmured, the dawn of bittersweet relief brimming, yet hiding her own reluctance. Leon nodded, their isolated communion perhaps permanently altered, yet sincere. "And yet I'm not entirely sure," he continued, leaving the field of speech open. As their conversation dwindled, the elevator stilled, the presence of fate inescapable as ever, and an unsettling familiarity with unfinished business hung in the air. His parting glance was filled with something unnameable, but not fleeting. I just wonder, he murmured, barely above a whisper, if someday you'll gamble for something more than survival. And there they were again, before a universe of choices tethered to the simplest of mechanisms. The door hissed, a creature released to roam the confines of their choices. It opened slowly, but where it led was still uncertain. A figure awaited them beyond the threshold, silhouetted against the fluorescent lights of the hallway. A figure holding a nondescript but dangerous-looking package. Leon's eyes narrowed sharply, cutting through shadows with precision. "Leave," was his only whisper, his voice heavy with unvoiced implication. But as the menace coiled behind Justine like the tail of a storm, her only response was to stand firm. Her resilience crystallized into defiance. "Some doors," she replied, heart racing, "are worth walking through together." Suddenly, in the silence before confrontation, their fates circled each other silently, stepping into a shared abyss where power played, and only the brave stood unshaken. And then, arising from the heart of darkness, Leon murmured, "Hold on, I think there's more than just shadows at bay." The sudden jolt threw them to one side, a momentary chaos of limbs and confined spaces as the elevator shifted sideways, not up or down. Justine clung to the rail, her free hand instinctively seeking balance as the world lurched off kilter. The sensation was sharp, a sharp reminder of the precarious nature of their suspension, both physically and in the grand scheme of unsaid promises. Leon steadied himself against the opposite wall, casting a wary glance upward, as if expecting the machinery above to resolve itself into order through sheer force of will. His confidence, long a shield forged by experience and enforced control, seemed temporarily disarmed by the metallic groan that surrounded them. "I think we've been switched onto a backup," he said, his voice tight with suspicion. The notion seemed both a relief and a potential complication, hidden systems at play within the depths of the building's mechanics, like the covert operations of the city outside. In the dimming light, Justine could see the shadows cast by worry pulling taut at the edges of Leon's eyes, the faint hint of vulnerability that surfaced amidst a life regimented by strength and strategy. Sinking into silence, the air felt charged between breaths, thick with anticipation. Nothing is ever what it seems. Justine had long learned this from the stained floors and whispered debts that shaped her days. But here, in the company of the infamous, the multifaceted nature of truth lay bare like an open ledger of opportunities lost and discovered. "So what now?" she asked, tone laced with the practicality of someone used to navigating unpredictable currents. Leon regarded her with a contemplative nod, an unreadable depth in his gaze that turned the question inward as much as it projected it outward. "Adapt. We find out who or what wants to keep us here and why," he replied, his voice a mix of command and inquiry, inviting her into an unspoken alliance that felt as natural as the confines were unnatural. Both the uncertainty and the possibility that frothed beneath the surface added to the mix of adrenaline coursing through her veins, a cocktail of curiosity and caution. There was strength in numbers and in understanding, something that sparked in the labyrinthine space that lay between revelation and disguise. The next hour dragged on in a haze of tension and muffled exchanges, time elongated like a shadow across the floor as they attempted to piece together the conglomerate of paths that led to this peculiar moment, makeshift timeline of intersecting histories circulating like ghosts in the confined shoebox that held more sway over them than logic dictated. Occasionally, Leon would check his phone, a thin line of frustration etched deeper with each unsuccessful attempt to connect. They were in a blind spot, disconnected, cut off. His shoulders tensed with the uncharacteristic admission of idle helplessness. "We're being isolated," Leon mused aloud, breaking the shared containment of their mutual silence. There was a renewed tension in his stance, the lion's roar muted but not suppressed by the silence surrounding them. The challenge rested in the digestion of these obstacles, adapting strategies forged on instinct and necessity. Justine nodded quietly, understanding weaving through her thoughts. It was one thing to be powerless against the physical laws of mechanics, but quite another to be passive in the face of manipulation, invisible strings pulled by faceless figures. When the elevator finally vibrated with an electronic pulse, the voice crackling over the intercom sounded more sinister, deliberate. "Leon and guest, your arrival has been delayed. Please stand by." The detached professionalism bore an unmistakable edge, lending gravity that eclipsed any previous assumption about an accidental mishap. Justine's eyes met Leon's, an unspoken acknowledgement solidifying like marble beneath thin veneer. "They aren't giving us much choice," Justine remarked, sarcasm doing little to alleviate the underlying truth of her words. Every instruction seemed carefully calibrated to fuel tension, ambiguous yet commanding, much like the man beside her often was in the world's perception. Leon took a breath, mastery heavy in its weight as it filled his lungs. "I've seen men play with far less and lose everything," he replied, delivering his assessment with a clarity that promised nothing but unequivocal poise. It dawned on her then, with the clarity afforded by extremes, that this situation demanded more than just survival. It was about finding footing in an undefined arena where power plays were enacted in shadows cast by elites against a backdrop of concrete and glass. The elevator's final shift confirmed the feeling as it resumed movement with a grinding acceptance, their descent more an allegory to defiance than resignation. Neither spoke as the minutes ticked through the linear journey of their silences, narrating the undocumented stories drawn between them. Nothing more needed saying. Some doors opened to worlds and fates beyond the tangible, woven from shared understanding and the inkling of unresolved familiarity. When the doors finally parted for the last time, the haunting echo of their parting would trail into futures laden with memories, quests, and unspoken alliances. Justine crossed the threshold, keeping the shadow of a smile beneath the sincerity of departure. Her thoughts lingered on the moments shared, echoes in the aftermath. "Next time, choose the stairs," she whispered, tossing his words back with gifted lightness, a gift veiled in quiet defiance. Leon stood, hands deep in pockets, mirth tugging quietly at the edge of tension, pulling taut across this moment's meaning. As she turned, a simple gesture caught her eye, dropped scarf, its emerald weave distinctive against the impersonal metal flooring of the elevator. Parting the uncertainty with a slow, unyielding certitude, she picked it up, weighing its presence and significance. A token held in transit. And as their gaze met once more, fleeting yet binding threads intertwined, the unspoken understanding became a promise, yet unfulfilled a glimmer against the bending horizon of shared destinies. Then, with a finality echoing in the cavernous space, the doors closed. Outside, the city exhaled its never-ending cycle of mystery, of stories untold, as the rhythm of footsteps carried slowly forward into a future likely different, yet all the more imminent by what came before. Yet behind her, in the continuing echo of a tale still developing, there came a whisper of farewell that clung to the edges of time. "Shall we gamble once more?" The air in the elevator turned electric when an unexpected voice, soft yet assertive, broke through the vibration of held breaths and clanking machinery. "Did you ever picture it like this? Being trapped, I mean, not just physically." The whispery remark wasn't cast by any usual passengers but by Justine, whose glance flickered with the recognition of a depth beyond mere circumstance. Leon's brow furrowed slightly, the inquiry pulling more than curiosity from his depths. It tugged at truths too intricate to unravel in a mechanical tomb. "Trapped is an interesting way to put it," he replied, an echo of jest for the situation that mirrored more than a crack between two contrasting worlds. In the dim light cast by the lurid bulb flickering above, Justine appeared a study of contrasts herself, an enigma wrapped in the mundania waitress in a diner that smelled of old victories and spilled ambition. Her fingers nervously twisted at the seams of her apron. Once white, but now a canvas covered in the insignia of 1,000 hours steeped in the remnants of everyone else's lives. She felt it then, the shifting air enclosing them, tinged with an unexpected tension, an intimate awareness. The change hadn't come with grandeur, but crept in with the subtlety of a rogue tide finally claiming its space. "You might be surprised to know," Justine began, her voice barely rising above a murmur, but slicing through their enclosed world, "that I didn't always look to these moments for truth. But sometimes being stuck shows you exactly what you can't see in motion." Leon nodded, the acknowledgement more than mere agreement. It was a silent accord between two survivors of different battles, a nod to wars won or lost, but never forgotten. In the mysterious alchemy of this unexpected meeting, the lines between captor and captive blurred. creating a new, undefined middle ground etched in quiet understanding. But their moment was interrupted, the jarring squeal of gears outside their vision line shattering the translucency of their intimacy. With every creak and groan of the antiquated elevator, the narrative changed, unsettled by the noises neighboring their shared isolation. The day had begun as so many others had a brunch crowd dispersed over checkered floors, the chime of orders shouted and the constant, comforting buzz of normalcy. Yet here they stood, bound in silence to reveal secrets only the iron box could have drawn from them. As the elevator once again jolted to a halt, the intensity in the carriage thickened, tangled together with the scent of ozone and worn fabric. Seconds ticked by, a metronome keeping time with rising panic, an unseen reality pressing in on them from every side. "Do you recall," Justine ventured after the claustrophobic silence returned, "our old diner's motto? Real coffee, real people." As if marketing coffee was anything like marketing safety in a tin can leave behind, right? She laughed softly, a sound replete with nostalgia and irony. To her surprise, Leon joined her with a chuckle that seemed like the precursor to rain after a drought, a prelude, forged from the screeching friction of friction and the palpable possibility of redemption. Their laughter brought a surprising ease. Each release sent into the small space like a faint breeze, carrying away remnants of anxiety. Yet no amount of hesitance removed the unspoken challenge their environment thrust upon them. "Tell me," Leon's voice cut into the interlude, filled with genuine curiosity, "why stay? In the city, at a job tying your dreams to a place losing all hope?" The question lingered, with eyes meeting over the battlefield of their shared kinship, and friction momentarily dissolved. For Justine, each word spoken was like tugging a frayed edge, revealing a tapestry of intertwined dreams, burdens, and resistance stitched with a lifetime's worth of experience. She studied Leon in turn, seeing not just the man revered and feared by circles whose shadows were stretched by willpower more than fear, but a glimpse of the weary soul beneath the decades' tapestry of ambition meeting regret. "I guess the same reason you came here," she decided softly, almost a whisper in the dwindling volume of the carriage. "For family, for promises, for futures buried in past." He seemed struck by the honest reflection in her words, his gaze traveling over her face, memorizing the moment's sincerity. That moment was punctuated by the deep-throated churn of the elevator's return to movement, settling into its rhythm again. Yet it was Leon who broke the tenuous quiet with words layered with unexpected resolve. "You know, there's something admirable about enduring for promise, even amidst inevitabilities." As suddenly as their silence was born, it was broken again. A loud, booming noise resonated from below, stirring prioritization over unspoken alliances. The sound of a door being forced open reached them in the quarters crafted by mechanics in happenstance. Reacting instinctively, Justine stiffened in anticipation. Her past, a narrative of necessity sharpened by abandonments and reconciliations, always ended with resilience's triumphal march. Despite knowing little of Leon's own history, she imagined threads not entirely different. A ghostly, tense drum underscored the stillness, accentuated only by shifting shadows and the odd glint of metallic light slicing through from the outside world. But for once, it seemed the specter of chance had other plans. The elevator, with persistence mirroring their communal angst, jolted again, carrying them down unexpectedly toward the light. They shared a glance, one of mutual determination tinged with the dread of choices forged in aftermaths of silence. Strength lay not in confrontation just yet, but tethered through endurance, honed by shadows, and held calm under pressure. "We can gamble on it," Leon whispered, sinking into metaphorical irony as daylight began to spill through barely seen seams. As if summoned by fate, the elevator touched ground with a powerful reverberation of bell, tolling not only for the journey's conclusion, but for the burgeoning revelations housed within their unplanned quest. They were both poised for continuation, but it was Justine who risked a tentative glance first, always willing to step forward where the brave walked before. What awaited them was ambiguous yet liberating, a palette of consumed pasts and nascent futures painted in colors of life lived on the edge. And in the fleeting moment of solidarity where ends and beginnings braided together, Leon's voice echoed belonging as much to the present as to the boundless threads unwinding. "The choice is still ours, isn't it? The shriek of metal grinding against metal set their world into disarray, the elevator's walls echoing their surprise like a scream trapped between their ears. A power surge? Justine guessed, gripping the rail until her knuckles turned white, her voice barely steady against the fear that rippled beneath their crafted composure. Leon didn't reply immediately, his instincts locked onto the threat beyond their box of urban confinement. His eyes flicked to the numbers dimly lit on the panel, unmoved static infinities staring back trapped against the backdrop of tense silence. In the chorus of shadows cast by their imprisonment, Justine felt the threads of her own story breathing in synchronicity with the moment. She emerged each day from Benny's, "If there's a way out," she thought, "let boldness find it." As waitress, a role no grander than survival's epitaph, now she stood against the nexus of her unraveling or redemption within the walls of chrome and wires. "I've never met a problem that doesn't listen to boundaries," Leon commented warily, his tone a tether to sanity amidst the madness. He straightened, exchanging a glance with her, a silently sworn allegiance sprung from the alleys of consideration. Their shared silence magnified the drumming of their hearts against the cold steel encasing them. Despite the chaos around and within, a quiet understanding began to unfold, a reminder of adversities often shadowed by clarity only found through shared trials. The crisis came not from the womb of silence, but the hiss of static that erupted through the intercom, crackling with intent. Leon and Justine, the voice carried an edge intimate yet distant. "You're not alone." A chill draped over Justine, her fate intertwined with trust's shadow. From the whispered past between them to this unforeseen alliance, suspicion and kinship meshed in the confines of their captivity. Leon frowned, brow furrowed, his fingers tapping thoughtfully against his cheek. "Who are you?" His demand carried the weight of both authority and the pasta mix that rested uneasily with him. The answer remained elusive, enveloped in the silence of withheld truths. "We have to get out of here," she stated, realizing she was voicing both their unspoken desires and collective resolve. It was now their turn to question the metal beast that contained them. And Leon, with the cunning expected of a mafia boss, spun the situation around. He leaned toward the panel, whispering strategies laced with the intuition of a career honed on unpredictability. "We're not supposed to play games without the odds." Leon's voice, tainted with authority, filled the claustrophobic tomb. The elevator lurched again, reminding them of the gravity keeping dreams grounded. And then, in between echoes of their hearts beating against invisible walls, the revelation struck. A sudden upturn, like a card unceremoniously slammed upon the table. All secrets belonged to those trapped by their telling. In the concealed pocket of her apron, Justine found the ace she'd hidden, not just any card, but a token, achieving the effect Leon's secrets did in broader circles. It was a reminder of long-forgotten tales wrapped around debts of bones, shadows of past lives disconnected by lost time and breathless exchanges. "Trust no phantom," she whispered, a mantra her father left her, drawing Leon's attention immediately to the object anchoring time and decision within the palm of her hand. His eyes narrowed, the pause between his breaths sharpening into taut strings laced with deduction. Pieces of puzzles that span worlds apart conjoined suddenly, a chain reaction of decisions surging forward. The sound of gears engaged broke the hold of temporal silence, the carriage teetering dangerously, revelation guided to penultimate confrontation. With resolute precision, Leon addressed the hidden voice, revealing knowledge honed in rooms painted with secrets. "Reveal yourself," he demanded, not just of their unseen adversary, but of fate, clinging to veils it dared not shred lightly. The world hung in anticipation, a whisper away from collapse. And in a moment stranger than dreams conceived by ends meeting beginnings, the elevator plunged, not in free fall, but like a destined journey curtailed by the force unseen. With gasps swallowed by violated silence, they braced against the inevitable, drawn inexorably toward clarity, frosting the edges of understanding. Lights. What do you think happens to shadows when the light dies? The question lingered like smoke from a snuffed-out candle, eerie yet illuminating, as the elevator lurched to a halt once more. Justine leaned back, the cold press of the elevator's metallic wall anchoring her amidst the restless tension, threatening to unbind her nerves. It was as if the universe conspired to keep her attached to this enigma of a man, testing every fiber of resilience forged in backbreaking shifts and unrewarded aspirations. Leon met her gaze, a tiny spark of intrigue flaring beneath his calculated calm. They still exist, hidden until the light returns or they find a new source. Isn't that how everything works down here? The space between them buzzed with an unspoken confession, an intimacy deeper than any ambient darkness or superficial gestures could shadow. Each moment became a horizontal point in a timeline, shared and distorted by the confines of their entrapment. In that silence, Justine recalled the familiar echoes of Benny's dinera place, where the clink of utensils serenaded the hurried clack of the register, and yet muffled life's more desperate whispers beneath its humming neon sign. Here, destiny seemed as fickle as the aging machinery creasing her reality, always slipping, but never falling away completely. The recent past had been a slideshow of ironies, from the static crackle of mysterious voices guiding them into conspiracy, to the desperate humor that kept commodities like hope and sanity solvent within their hearts. Leaving that burdensome past behind, Justine parted her lips slightly, daring to add a voice to their burdened quiet. Have they always watched you like that? Or is it us now? His response was a nearly imperceptible shift of his weight from one polished shoe to another, the subtle chime of leather brushing softly against metal. Let's just say the walls have ears, and maybe more. You're in a room full of shadows, after all. A wry chuckle issued from her, bold and balloon-light, easing the growing canyon of anticipation. If Leon sought weaknesses, their dance of truths crafted a bond stronger than conclusions hurried by fear. Then they're listening to quite a duet, she mused, her wit reflecting off their confinement's polished veneer. The exchange was a reminder of their sudden leap into an equation unsolvable by tradition. An upward glance sought answers in the tiny crack of light filtering through the ceiling, tracing a threadbare explanation around their predicament. The drone of stalled mechanics whispered intimate promises of continued engagement or sudden revelation. Leon watched her contemplation with measured regard, containing a flickering trust kindled rarely within and fewer allowed to discover. Suddenly, the weight of circumstance made itself starkly visible. A flicker of illicit light that drew both their gaze to the glowing outline of a metallic object exposed where the elevator ceiling didn't entirely meet the panel. Seems like we've found the saboteur, Justine said, eyes narrowing against the conspiracy of wires and half-cut circuits, a web threatening to clamp them within an unknown agenda. The small compartment, initially unnoticed, became the centerpiece of their investigation, bait placed carefully where vigilance and vulnerability intersected in the language of survival. Leon reached, fingers grazing the shadowy lines drawn intricately into the device's framework. Do you know what happens when someone plays with the wrong wire? The crackle of uncertainty met their silence, tension aligning with their hastily dawning plan. Yet doubt neither swayed them nor incised their resolve. In a patched future defined not by meticulous forethought, but by snapping decisions, Justine met the unknown with a borrowed courage that asked for no reaffirmation. Seems we figure it out before it wraps around us. Leon nodded, and for a fraction of fate's unyielding timeline, their sensibilities coalesce, rivulets of mutual resolve coursing beneath constrained dreams and combined intuition. We could short-circuit this, Leon proposed. Power and perceptiveness interlocking into calculated intent. Wires don't care whose story became memory, only that some endings are foregone. The choice lay temporarily empowered within their discernment, and movement wouldn't yield clarity until destiny unscrambled itself across their firmament. As her heartbeat steadied to match his timbre, Justine reached out, guided half by instinct, half through shared anticipation. Let's see whose shadows serve today. Leaning together, their fingertips collaborated, setting sight on conclusions inked by variables unknown, but soon equated. Within the uncertain promise of power yet unseen, the presence of their nasal exhale reverberated a tether where fears tied shadows into silhouettes, and the willed courage spun beads woven tight in unseen hands. Then, in the reflective moment where their exploits bled anticipation, amidst the hum of recalibrated purpose and evolving souls threading each other's essence, Reality shifted as suddenly as recognition dawned. Their tether snapped to a conclusion as the elevator's oppressive dark shattered into hazy, uncertain light, a possibility unsealed, casting long shadows that parted like waves against unforeseen shores. When floods of clarity sparked within their collective gaze, shattering illusions yet promising more than ambiguity, a voice summarily noted their unspoken compact. Mind the shadows. New light is all it takes to break or birth them again. The sharp stench of burnt wires filled the elevator, curling around Justine and Leon like desperate fingers finally grasping at something tangible. Startled, she jerked backwards, her heart thundering a terrified rhythm as Leon quickly pulled her away from the panel. Smoke spiraled upwards, betraying the sleek, polished facade of safety the elevator projected. Justine's eyes, woody and unblinking, followed the gray tendrils crawling towards the cracked ceiling, imparting a metallic bitterness on her tongue. Once again, the world around them seemed intent on revealing truths they'd rather keep hidden. "This thing's a death trap," she muttered, voice barely above a whisper, hands trembling with more than the weight of imminent danger. In the muted chaos of flickering lights, Leon moved with an unsettling calm, his presence a stark contrary to the panic that gripped her. His attention narrowed on the smoking corner, his eyebrows knitted in concentration above eyes that promised little forgiveness to whoever had designed this scenario. "It might be," he replied, a begrudging admiration tinging his words. "But it's also a window of opportunity if we use it right." Every fiber of Justine's being screamed to run, to escape the entrapment that threatened to collapse her fragile barrier of normality. Instead, she forced herself to remain, an unwilling accomplice to the unfolding script that destiny had penned in this metal cage. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Willing the reality into focusers was a life punctuated by struggle, built on the foundation of routine and guided by survival instincts honed over years of life's heavy blows. She thought of Benny's, of the familiar, greasy scent, of patrons who left bits of their lives behind with each visit. Yet here she was, standing in a suspended box not only of metal and wire, but of uncertainties, bounded by the presence of a man who, despite his notoriety, was encased in a similar labyrinth of expectation and vulnerability. As the haze of smoke began to dissipate, Leon's silhouette became less a shadowy specter and more human flaws and all. It was easy to underestimate what lay behind the stoic demeanor and carefully crafted reputation. "We need to get out," Justine repeated, all business and fear hidden behind a facade of pragmatic urgency. Leon nodded, a silent agreement underlining a shared purpose. "And we will. Together." The elevator shuddered ominously, an audible reminder that they were suspended above normalcy, a dance with gravity they couldn't sidestep or control. "It always comes down to survival, doesn't it?" she asked, more to herself than to the man beside her. Yet Leon heard her, his gaze catching hers with a perceptiveness that burned. "Survival," he echoed thoughtfully. "And beyond that, it's about forging a path through whatever hell tries to block your way. To live, you adapt. We adapt." They moved as one then, inspecting the panel, fingers skimming over circuits they hoped held answers. There Justine pointed, eyes catching a frayed wire sparking against the dim light, a path where clarity intersected with imminent peril. Together they set to work, each moment an exercise in trust, an alliance tested against adversity. Inch by inch, they unraveled the makeshift trap laid for them, sweat beating just beneath the surface as focus honed itself into a razor-sharp edge. Their efforts were slow, yet progress was a balm to the uncertainty gnawing away at composure. The crisis had forged an unexpected camaraderie, a truth that simmered beneath the surface with each shared glance and break of breath. Leon shifted, pausing to study her with something akin to curiosity intertwined with determination. "Why do you stay, even amidst all this? Not just here in this elevator, but in a life that seems to give nothing back?" The question was as direct as it was unexpected, the starkness of his words igniting emotions buried deep within. She paused, considering a past riddled with the imprints of others' failures. "I stay because change is a slow dance," she admitted finally, her voice soft yet firm with conviction. "I stay because I believe deep down that something beautiful emerges from chaos. Like now, I never intended this, but it's an opportunity to redefine where the past lets go. His thoughtful silence was the only response she needed, a reciprocation of honesty that valued her own truth, acknowledging the strength behind each humble decision. As the sparks subsided and smoke dissipated into memory, laughter unexpectedly bubbled up, an alchemy of fear and relief merging into a shared sigh. "We did it," she grinned, a trace of triumph evident in her expression. "We always had it in us," Leon countered, the acknowledgement charged with warmth. Glimpsed beyond the hardened visage of a man whose territory transcended both fear and admiration. Finally, as their ordeal neared its end, just before the elevator clunked into downward motion once more, Justine glanced at him, emboldened. "Do you think we'll ever tell anyone about this?" Leon chuckled, a knowing smile breaking softly across his face. "If we did, they'd never believe us." The hum of the elevator's descent enveloped them, a melodic overture heralding a return to the lives waiting beyond. But hidden within the space they sought to leave, the silence behind them loomed with unmatched clarity, a memory penned not with ink, but with indelible moments. As the doors slid open, back into the tangible embrace of reality, a single question lingered in the wake of their shared journey, a line murmured into the hollow, carrying forward into whatever awaited. What will we do with the shadows we found? The dizziness in Justine's head spun memories and moments alike as warmth replaced the cold walls closing around them. She stood in the elevator, not exactly unchanged after their ordeal, but renewed with a resilience as radiant as it was undeniable. Leon watched her with eyes that had shifted from guarded to something akin to admiration. Justine, for all her concealed doubts, presented a facade of someone who had danced through rainstorms and bruised pasts, merging into the sunlight of ambitions she guarded like jewels. The elevator dinged before lurching to a halt once more. The doors, mechanisms now alien in their benignity, began to part, inching away from their recent confinement. There was a chill in the large, sterile lobby waiting beyond, its vastness echoing their silent footsteps and the muted thud of nervous heartbeats. "I didn't think we'd make it," Justine confessed, voice tinted with disbelief, yet stitched with the resolve honed over marathon shifts, slinging coffee and scrubbing counters. Leon nodded, an enigmatic smile tugging at his features. "We had the same odds as everyone else," he replied simply, a strange woven tapestry of fear, courage, and something unnameable lingering in his eyes. They were met by silence, clear and scintillant like the first dawn rays breaking through clouds. In the calm after the storm, beneath towering ceilings and strands of lights reflecting familiar realities, they found choices waiting to be made. Justine pulled her cardigan closer, the fabric worn and comforting against the starkness. Her fingertips brushed against something unfamiliar, small slip of paper wedged into the pocket. She fished it out, unfolding the crisp white note. Her eyes scanned the neatly printed words. "You have learned something. Now use it wisely." Her breath caught unexpectedly, an unseen hand tracing secrets through her heart and mind. The note was a tangible piece of evidence, a symbol of transformation, as much as a reminder of the darkness navigated alongside a man she now viewed with a complex mix of reverence and wariness. "We both did." Leon's voice rumbled through the air, just above a whisper, but soaking up every particle of the moment. "What's yours to keep?" Justine considered him carefully. The raw nerve of vulnerability had softened her edges, peppered memory fragments, weaving together narratives, until once disparate stories intersected at a crossroad paved with experiences newly understood. "What's mine?" she repeated softly, an acknowledgement as gentle as it was impactful. Her past left jagged silhouettes she was determined to smooth. Little by little, with courage as her cornerstone, she'd started building bridges between what was behind and what lay ahead. The floor beneath hummed in ambient silence, carrying them closer to the culmination of potential, lest it slip unexplored. A compliance officer approached, his footsteps echoing with practiced authority, a uniform shielding emotions rehearsed for objectivity. "Mr. Leon, Miss Justine," he addressed, nodding curtly. "We'd like to express our apologies for the malfunction." His eyes flickered under scrutiny, a professionalism that unpeeled now frayed facades in the wake of factors unseen and variables unwritten. Leon nodded non-committally, the pretense he held onto celebrated like a war standard worn by truth's firmly paced heart. "We're all participants dealing with fate's malfunctions," Justine retorted, her gaze unwavering like convictions sculpted beneath fires. Less warmth and more blistering passion for truths uncovered. A sigh wriggled free from the officer, a tug of frayed threads calling foreign resolute determination. Security is extra vigilant, today left scars capable of reopening. Through a space cleaved by necessity, she made quiet calculations. Someday, Justine offered, her voice clear, might lead us to dwell in firms unshakable. Whether the officer deciphered the depth defining her declaration was indeterminate. Leon's smile, careful, measured, appreciated the exchange for what it embodied. Kinship amidst strangers and solutions crafted from situations sewn imperfectly like patchwork parables potentially held still under shared shadows. With departures of hard lines reflecting redemption's tempo, the officer retreated, leaving a residue of permutable infinities to fumble where reason and prelude were crafted equally within sweat and persistence. As the world soared around them, timeless and weary, Justine's thoughts trailed, despite steps retracing toward familiarity bearing earnest contingency. Citing deals forged amidst messes unfolded, lies gilded in mirth and reflection, she found courage thrumming beside hopeful victories to come. "Change feels unpredictable," she remarked, the reminiscence both echo and completion. "We're better when we understand and act on what's learned." "Sometimes," Leon replied, a silence steadfast to her sentiments. "From understanding sprouts potential more extravagant than the circumstances placed within." They paused at the threshold of choices awaiting. Thresholds sketched widespread with promised value, where repercussions given audible breaths claim not cold efficiency, but logical advancement. Leon moved first, footsteps in echo past breathless retention, toward corridors carpeted with advancing reconciliation, towards shadows rendered distant by righteousness, affectionately hopeful. Justine faced horizons beckoning, stepped fearlessly. That was the only answer established beyond change wrought almost by chance, but considerably by companionship unforeseen. And as light speared tantalizing through distant obscurities, she turned back momentarily, where realization deep-seated in whispered dialogue gave gravity to divides crossed. Clarity nipped seas obscured by ends, thin-lipped slices echoing infinity's overture. What lies do you whisper when light fails to find your truths? A promise is a debt unpaid, and I've come to collect. The voice sliced through the delicate morning air like a maestro's whip, leaving Justine momentarily paralyzed on the bustling sidewalk of daylight-struck chaos. The industrial hum of the city morning had cocooned her in anonymity, distilling an unknown comfort from the frenetic choreography of pedestrians weaving complex patterns on verbena-scented walks. But the voice had origins beyond these earthy scents and careless rhythms, a visceral tether sharp enough to part layers as she'd thought long shelved. Justine halted against the grind of metal-scraping stone, a road construction site punctuating downtown's melody of progress. Behind her, Leon remained statuesque, his expression a mask against the intrigue of impending confrontation, veiled as curiosity. The voice belonged not to fate, but an unexpected fragment of the past, the specter of familial ties long severed by reckless yearning and deceptive peace-granting boon. It was her brother Marco, once a vibrant youth clinging to defiance, now aged into shadows by alleyway tribunals and tropes left undone. She was immediately drawn into the creased emanations of his presence, the subtle elixir of rust and unspoken accords, strain taught over years untraveled. Marco's rugged posture was tangled in ropes of memories, smoothed by sin prospers, yet accentuated by the weighted thought of a sister and her allies now witnessing threads unfurling, gestures gilded by inheritance's fault lines. "Marco," she addressed finally, drawing the firmness of syllables through sleepless questions and answers buried beneath the dust of discontent. Debt calls both sides of every decision. Her words bore the resilience of unfolded wings, only hers now as they escaped shackled lines of familial distrust. He met her with eyes that mirrored elements of their guarded pasta molten conveyor of shared history projecting whispers into the arena unfolding. "A debt once deferred but never absolved," Marco acknowledged, thumbing through revelations like playing cards shuffled through attainable possibilities. Leon, meanwhile, reevaluated the terrain with an interest piqued less by the who than the latent threads of possibility sown in the why. Unsure footing had been replaced wholly by means of resolution gained through hidden understanding and shared dance with proximity's embrace. "What's brought you here, Marco?" Leon interjected, a chord striking through the suspended moment with invested detachment. The conduit awaiting reason unbridged, seeding tails intact only until necessity unhurriedly appointed resolution. Marco turned, fixing an appraising glance upon the mafioso whose reputation preceded him. Same thing that always does, loyalty claimed by blood. Debts owed. His words cracked like the strike between hammer and anvil, fueled by words parsed and perfected over time spent in clandestine pursuits. Justine's heart kicked against an imposed rhythm. The specter of her brother thought exiled beyond reach, pulling her toward an unscripted unity, a pact against potential ruin now evolved into manifest destiny. In the rising pressure and the anticipation of buried sins revealed, adjustments were made not in the physical space they occupied, but in the tides looping around the notion of alliance and the realms of familial connections burdened by crown sins. "Justine," Marco's voice whispered amidst the tumult of inner paths chosen, drawing her into the cusp of resolved destinies. "We need you. The family needs its way home." Her stomach twisted into bitter anticipation, understanding trickling like spring streams where clarity met trepidation at the cusp of expectation, once grounded by broken promises. Yet convictions vast as her resolve leaned forward to embrace truths laid bared. Unexpectedly, Leon murmured with a warmth that cut through the tumult with grace, a maestro syncing tunings in midst of discord's din. Families arrive at unspoken truths, not by walking customary paths, but by forging anew when paths no longer hold. The sun, filtering through urban chasms, framed Marco's face, sculpting shadows against the light-bearing angles, longing for sanctuary unbounded and unbowed over time, measured in echoes. Time held the four of them captive at an intersection carved by fate's exigency, where once disjoint ideas of future sagas roamed unchecked, now bound toward resolution, a denouement articulated under sky's bare light. Within her, the revelation finalized, her eyes steady against years spent deflecting, defending, and ultimately discovering the purpose behind every tear and lullaby resonated. The world had shifted once more. Caught now at the precipice of collective journeys, it lay under her feet and in her hands, both tangible and ephemeral. Breath held as time creased forward, the stage set for actions birthed from conviction seeds waiting to sprout. "I'm here," she returned firmly, eyes anchored on Marco. "The debts we keep are defined by those we choose to repay, not just the kin, but truths guiding destiny." In those words rested the culmination of their protracted journey, chartering into realms once thought elusive, recount through dust-kissed clay where roots stilled by tumble forward. The gap between paths merged into the temporal space held tenuously between siblings, their silence holding more weight than words of war and alliance not entirely made, but fixed with promises of understanding without term decree. And so they set forth across a world reshaped, each bound to fragments of aligned mission and opposing echoes that coalesced within touch, withering limits, composing unwritten symphonies. Yet, as persistence crafted toward its peak, Leon asked amidst the continued silence, "But at what cost does home redefine journey and absolve the lore yet endured?" It hung ponderously resonant, a chorus challenging their silent march into the demise of conclusive thrives, demanding clarity from grievance's silent echo, a question shaping paths trudged faithfully onwards into tumult, unbridgeable paths further than shadows cast and light claims. The fading light dipped beneath the horizon's sway as they moved together, a new journey kindling in the ashes of old. In the trailing remnants, Marco held forth a single, unseen objective family crest, worn by time yet gleaming with potential, and murmured to its edge, "Tell me what shadows promise when they wear the truth's full weight."